Unchecked manipulation is one of the most dangerous psychological forces because it does not begin loudly, violently, or dramatically. It begins quietly, often disguised as affection, validation, or admiration. When a person allows someone else to enter their emotional world without boundaries, every decision they make can start shifting, not because they choose it, but because they are being steered. This is the essence of manipulation. It replaces one's internal compass with someone else's agenda. And the tragic part is that most people do not recognize it until the consequences are already unfolding. Human behavior is shaped by emotion far more than by logic. When someone is emotionally vulnerable, lonely, insecure, or craving approval, their mind becomes more open to outside influence. A manipulative person understands this instinctively. They know exactly which words trigger compliance, which gestures create attachment, and which fears silence resistance. Over time, the manipulated person stops questioning, stops evaluating, and stops thinking independently. Their moral structure does not vanish instantly. It erodes slowly, like sand slipping away grain by grain. This erosion can push a person toward choices they would have never imagined making on their own. They may start betraying their values, hurting people they once cared about, or engaging in dangerous behaviors while convincing themselves that they are doing the right thing. This is not because they are inherently cruel, but because their inner voice has been replaced by someone else's louder, more dominant narrative. That is why manipulation is not simply influence. It is psychological control that reshapes identity. The most alarming part is that manipulation often hides behind the illusion of desire or emotional connection. A manipulative figure might present themselves as the only one who understands, the only one who truly cares, or the only one who can give meaning. These phrases bind the manipulated person emotionally, making them believe they must protect or please the manipulator at all costs. And once the mind starts believing that someone else's approval is more important than its own integrity, morality becomes negotiable. Boundaries disappear. Decisions become reactive instead of reflective. This is how unthinkable actions take root. Not in moments of impulsive madness, but in long stretches of psychological conditioning. A person begins to justify behavior that once horrified them. They may convince themselves that harming others is necessary, that betraying trust is unavoidable, or that sacrificing their values is a sign of loyalty. Manipulation rewrites reasoning. It creates a distorted version of reality where wrong feels right and right feels irrelevant. Education about emotional boundaries is the antidote. When people learn how manipulation works, how it infiltrates thoughts, how it exploits insecurities, how it escalates step by step, they become less susceptible. Emotional education teaches individuals to ask crucial questions. Why am I making this decision? Whose voice is guiding me right now? Is this action aligned with my values or with someone else's pressure? These questions restore clarity and help prevent emotional entanglement from spiraling into destructive choices. Establishing boundaries is not about resisting love or refusing connection. It is about protecting one's ability to think clearly. A healthy person may influence you, but they will never demand you to betray yourself. Manipulators, however, thrive on blurred lines. They encourage secrecy, isolation, urgency, and guilt. All classic markers of psychological control. Recognizing these signs early is essential because the longer manipulation continues, the more deeply it rewires the mind. Another important aspect is understanding how emotional isolation fuels manipulation. When someone distances themselves from their support system, whether intentionally or due to external pressure, they lose access to alternative perspectives. They no longer hear voices that remind them of their values, their history, or their identity. The manipulator becomes the only source of emotional interpretation. This imbalance is what drives people to unthinkable choices, not because they don't know right from wrong, but because they no longer trust their own judgment. History, literature, and real-life events all show the same pattern. Human beings are capable of extraordinary compassion, and extraordinary cruelty depending on who influences them. The mind is powerful but also impressionable. Without emotional boundaries, it becomes a fertile ground for manipulation that escalates into harmful decisions, broken relationships, and irreversible actions. Unchecked manipulation can turn even a gentle heart into a weapon controlled by someone else. It can convert emotional dependence into moral collapse. That is why awareness is not optional. It is a form of self-defense. People must understand their own emotional triggers, insecurities, and vulnerabilities, not to hide from them, but to protect them. The stronger a person's relationship with themselves, the harder it is for anyone to bend their will. Emotional education should begin early and continue throughout life. People should learn to differentiate healthy influence from toxic pressure, encouragement from coercion, connection from control. When individuals are taught to self-reflect, to pause before reacting, to evaluate intentions, and to maintain a strong sense of self, manipulation loses its power. Even when external pressure attempts to twist their morals, their internal stability keeps them grounded. Unchecked manipulation does not just change decisions, it changes identity. It pushes a person into a psychological fog where loyalty to someone else becomes more important than loyalty to truth, justice, or humanity. And once a person crosses that threshold, they may participate in actions that devastate others, as well as themselves. But awareness breaks this cycle. Boundaries break this cycle. Education breaks this cycle. When people understand that love does not require blind obedience and validation does not require self-betrayal, they become resilient. They stop being controlled. They stop being pushed toward darkness. They reclaim their ability to choose, not from fear, not from pressure, but from clarity. Unchecked manipulation can destroy lives, but understanding it can save them. Awareness of red flags is not just a skill. It is a form of protection that can determine whether a situation becomes harmful or remains under control. When a person begins to behave in ways that contradict their usual patterns, something deeper is usually happening beneath the surface. These shifts are rarely random. They often signal emotional manipulation, hidden distress, or psychological pressure that the person may be unable or unwilling to express openly. That is why paying attention to these signs is essential. It is not about suspicion, it is about safeguarding well-being before danger escalates. Isolation is one of the earliest and most powerful red flags. When someone begins withdrawing from friends, family, or trusted social connections, it often means another influence is filling the space that support systems once occupied. Isolation can be subtle at first: missed calls, excuses, reduced communication. But over time, it becomes a pattern. It may look like the person is simply busy or overwhelmed, but in reality, isolation often happens when someone else is controlling their access to the outside world. Once the individual is cut off from their network, they become easier to manipulate because they no longer hear alternative perspectives. Without outside voices reminding them of their strength, worth, and autonomy, they become dependent on the one influence that remains. Secrecy is another major warning sign that psychological pressure is at play. People naturally keep some things private, but secrecy caused by fear or manipulation feels different. It is guarded, tense, and inconsistent. A person under pressure may hide their conversations, change their routine without explanation, or suddenly become defensive about harmless questions. They may disclose half-truths or shift stories frequently. This secrecy is not a character flaw. It is often a survival response. They hide information because they fear consequences, either imposed by the manipulator or created by their own confusion. Education about psychological safety teaches that secrecy rooted in fear is not normal. It is a sign that a person feels unsafe expressing their reality. Drastic behavioral shifts are perhaps the biggest red flag of all. These shifts may be emotional, physical, or relational. A calm person becoming suddenly irritable. A confident person developing self-doubt. a joyful person turning anxious or withdrawn. Behavioral changes are like emotional alarms. They signal that the person's internal world is being shaken, and while some behavioral changes can come from stress, grief, or life events, changes caused by manipulation have a distinct pattern. They appear suddenly, they escalate quickly, and they contradict the person's core character. When someone's personality seems to collapse or transform into a version that feels unrecognizable, it often indicates that they are battling a pressure greater than they can handle alone. Recognizing these signs early matters because emotional manipulation rarely begins with visible harm. It begins with psychological erosion, small shifts in behavior, subtle compliance, gradual loss of confidence, and a growing sense of dependency. When these red flags go unnoticed, the situation can escalate into decisions and actions that have irreversible consequences. But when red flags are acknowledged, they provide an opportunity for intervention, support, and safety. Awareness is not about controlling someone. It is about understanding their mental and emotional environment. When you notice red flags, it opens a conversation. It helps the affected person realize that they are not invisible, that someone cares enough to notice the subtle changes, and that they are not alone. Many people trapped in manipulative dynamics feel ashamed or confused. They believe they are responsible for their own suffering. When someone recognizes their distress, it breaks the illusion created by psychological pressure. Understanding red flags also empowers individuals to protect themselves. If a person learns to recognize isolation, manipulation, secrecy, and emotional shifts within their own life, they can ask the right questions before harm intensifies. They can reflect, why am I hiding this? Why do I feel the need to withdraw? Why am I afraid to speak or make decisions? Why do I feel disconnected from who I used to be? These questions act like an internal compass, guiding them back toward clarity. When someone becomes aware of the red flags in their own behavior, they can step back, reevaluate, and seek support before the situation becomes dangerous. Awareness also protects communities. It empowers friends, families, and professionals to identify patterns that point toward emotional or psychological distress. When society becomes educated about these behaviors, fewer people fall into manipulation unnoticed. It builds a culture where people check on each other, where silence is not ignored, and where sudden changes are explored with gentleness instead of judgment. This community awareness is powerful because sometimes the affected person cannot speak for themselves. Their mind may be clouded by confusion, loyalty, guilt, or fear. Someone else noticing can become the turning point that saves their life. Psychological pressure is invisible, but its effects are not. The body reacts with stress, the mind reacts with fear, and behavior reveals what words cannot express. But many people are taught to ignore instincts, hide pain, or stay quiet to avoid conflict. This cultural silence allows manipulation to grow unchecked. That is why awareness must be taught the same way we teach safety in any other area of life, as a practical skill, not an emotional burden. Just as we learn to recognize physical danger, we must learn to recognize emotional danger with equal seriousness. Awareness of red flags is not about assuming the worst, it is about preparing for the possibility of harm. When we notice signs early, we can intervene early. Early intervention prevents escalation. It disrupts the manipulator's control. It restores the affected person's sense of power. It redirects the situation from danger toward safety. Many tragic outcomes could have been avoided if red flags were recognized sooner. That is why awareness saves lives, literally and emotionally. At its core, awareness is an act of care. It honors human dignity by recognizing distress before despair settles in. It acknowledges that psychological pressure is real, powerful, and often hidden behind smiles or excuses. When we train ourselves to notice isolation, secrecy, and sudden behavioral changes, we become guardians of our own well-being and the well-being of others. Red flags are not accusations, they are signals. They tell us that someone is struggling, losing themselves, or being influenced in harmful ways. When we respond with understanding, patience, and support, we offer a lifeline at the exact moment it is needed most. And that is how awareness becomes more than knowledge. It becomes protection. It becomes empowerment. It becomes the difference between a situation spiraling into tragedy and a person finding their way back to safety and strength. Awareness of red flags truly saves lives, not through dramatic heroism, but through quiet observation, emotional intelligence, and the courage to act when something feels wrong. A person's true strength is rarely visible in moments of comfort. It reveals itself when circumstances grow dark, when danger closes in, and when the world feels suddenly unstable beneath one's feet. Crisis has a way of stripping away illusions and exposing the core of who we are. In those moments, strength is not measured by physical power or loud declarations, but by the will to survive, to protect, and to push forward despite fear. This is why some of the most extraordinary human qualities emerge when everything seems to be collapsing. The mind, body, and spirit synchronize in ways that cannot be explained by simple chance. Survival, contrary to what many believe, is not luck. It is a fusion of instinct, clarity, and an unbreakable desire to live. When danger surrounds a person, especially someone responsible for another life, such as an unborn child, a deeper layer of determination awakens. This determination is not taught, it is built into human nature. The instinct to protect is one of the most powerful forces a person can experience. It overrides hesitation, replaces confusion with focus, and pushes fear aside so that action becomes possible. The body enters a heightened state where every sense becomes sharper. Sounds are clearer, movements quicker, decisions faster. The mind scans for possibilities instead of obstacles. In this state, even someone who feels fragile in ordinary life can perform extraordinary acts when crisis strikes. This strength is not heroic in a dramatic sense. It is human. It rises from a quiet but fierce belief that giving up is not an option. People often underestimate themselves until the moment where survival is the only path. A crisis teaches them something profound. The human will is far stronger than they ever imagined. Even when a situation seems hopeless or overpowering, the internal voice that whispers fight becomes louder, steadier, and more insistent. Many individuals who have survived extreme circumstances later say they did not have time to think, they just acted. But that is the clarity born from instinct, a clarity that cuts through panic and enables a person to see what must be done when a person is responsible for protecting a child, or the possibility of a child. The instinct intensifies even further. The awareness that another life depends entirely on them becomes a powerful motivator. It creates a layer of courage that does not crumble under pressure. The fear of harm transforms into the determination to survive, and the emotional connection with the child, even one not yet born, becomes a source of strength that grows in direct proportion to the danger. Many parents have described this shift as a surge of energy, a sense of purpose, or a sudden clarity that guides their every move. It is not imagined, it is the body's natural response to preserve life. But instinct alone is not enough. What separates survival from tragedy is the ability to think clearly despite the chaos. A person who survives understands the situation not only emotionally, but strategically. They analyze their surroundings even under stress. They make decisions quickly but responsibly. They recognize which actions are possible, which are risky, and which are necessary. This mental clarity is what allows them to break through barriers, whether physical ones like locked doors or emotional ones like paralyzing fear. Clarity does not eliminate danger, it organizes the response to danger. In crisis, the mind is forced to choose between surrender and action. True strength lies in choosing action even when the chances seem slim. People discover abilities they never trained for. They lift heavier objects than they ever could, endure pain they never thought they could tolerate, and solve problems in seconds despite exhaustion, injuries, or panic. This strength does not come from physical preparation, it comes from purpose. A person who knows why they must survive finds the how in the moment. Crises also reveal character. They expose whether someone collapses under fear or rises despite it. They show whether someone will let darkness take over or will fight for light. Strength in crisis is not just about protecting oneself. It is about protecting one's dignity, one's values, and one's hope for the future. A person who decides to survive is not only saving a life, they are saving their story, their potential, and the future of the child who depends on them. Strength also appears in the aftermath of crisis. Survival does not end when the immediate danger is over. The psychological weight of what happened, the shock, the confusion, the trauma, all of these become new challenges. Yet the same strength that carried the person through the danger continues to guide them afterward. They rebuild, they heal, they learn, and they grow. They realize that the crisis did not break them, it revealed them. It showed them who they are at their core, someone capable, resilient, and far more powerful than they ever believed. People often assume that survivors are lucky, but luck alone cannot break windows, cannot navigate smoke-filled rooms, cannot push a terrified mind into decisive action. Luck may open a path, but strength walks through it. The combination of instinct and clarity is what transforms a threatening moment into a story of endurance. It is what allows someone to protect themselves and the life growing inside them, even when everything around them is falling apart. A person's true strength is not loud or dramatic. It does not need an audience. It emerges quietly, powerfully, and undeniably when life demands it. Crisis reveals this strength not as something new, but as something that was always there, hidden beneath routine, fear, and doubt. And once a person sees what they are capable of in their darkest moment, they carry that knowledge with them forever. Strength discovered in crisis becomes a lifelong source of confidence. It teaches a person that they can face adversity, not because danger disappears, but because their will to survive is stronger than any force trying to destroy them. It teaches them that instinct and clarity are their allies. It teaches them that the bond between themselves and their child can ignite a type of courage that defies even the most overwhelming circumstances. In moments of crisis, true strength is not a miracle. It is the human spirit at its highest capacity. It is survival shaped by love, sharpened by clarity, and driven by a force that refuses to let darkness win. Justice is often imagined as a grand dramatic event, a court ruling, a public reckoning, or a moment of confrontation. Yet in reality, justice rarely appears in such predictable ways. It is subtle, patient, and sometimes astonishingly indirect. Harmful intentions, no matter how carefully concealed or aggressively executed, rarely succeed in the long term. The world has a way of balancing itself, not through instantaneous retaliation, but through a combination of natural consequence, community awareness, and the resilience of those who endure harm. Observing this phenomenon teaches a critical lesson. Wrongdoing carries consequences that cannot be escaped, and truth has a way of surfacing even when it seems buried. When harmful acts are committed, the immediate results may seem to favor the wrongdoer. There can be moments of triumph, deception, or perceived control. But these moments are fragile and temporary, because actions rooted in malice or selfish gain inherently destabilize their own foundation. Wrongdoing often relies on secrecy, manipulation, or coercion, conditions that are difficult to sustain indefinitely. Eventually, cracks appear. Small inconsistencies, overlooked details, and unaccounted-for variables start to surface. These cracks may seem insignificant at first, but they gradually widen, creating a pathway for truth to emerge. Justice in these circumstances is not sudden. It is cumulative, building through patterns and evidence until the wrong is undeniable. Community intervention is one of the most powerful, though sometimes unexpected, avenues through which justice manifests. People rarely act in isolation. Harmful behavior often draws attention, whether through subtle changes in behavior, indirect consequences, or the intuition of those who observe it from the outside. Communities, friends, neighbors, colleagues, or even strangers, play a critical role in detecting and responding to injustice. When observers notice discrepancies, patterns of manipulation, or actions that harm others, they may intervene in ways that seem coincidental or coincidentally timed, yet their involvement can dramatically shift outcomes. Intervention does not always take the form of formal action. Sometimes, it is simply bearing witness, offering support to the victim, or sharing information that exposes deceit. The presence of these collective eyes and voices increases the likelihood that wrongdoing will not remain hidden, and it underscores the reality that no malicious act occurs in total isolation. Fate and circumstance also contribute to justice in ways that can seem extraordinary or ironic. While fate is often spoken of poetically, it can be understood as the natural course of events responding to human behavior. Actions have consequences, and the systems within society, both social and natural, have a way of responding to imbalance. A harmful plan may fail because of an unanticipated variable, a delayed reaction, or an unforeseen consequence. These occurrences may appear coincidental, but they are often the result of cause and effect processes that operate independently of anyone's intent. Justice, in this sense, is less about a human-enforced punishment and more about the inevitability of consequences aligning with actions over time. The idea is simple but profound. No act exists in a vacuum, and every harmful intention interacts with the environment in ways that eventually bring truth to light. The resilience of the victim plays an equally significant role in justice arriving. Those who endure harm are not powerless. They are often capable of reclaiming control and revealing wrongdoing through their actions, testimony, and persistence. Resilience is a quiet, powerful form of justice because it challenges the narrative imposed by the wrongdoer. A victim's ability to survive, speak out, document events, and maintain integrity gradually undermines the manipulator's influence. While immediate outcomes may favor the aggressor, the victim's perseverance often exposes the truth over time. This process highlights that justice is not always about punishment alone. It is about truth being recognized and power being restored to those who were unjustly harmed. Justice arriving in unexpected ways teaches that wrongdoing is inherently unstable. Malicious actions require manipulation, secrecy, and deception, but these are difficult to sustain indefinitely. Human systems, from social networks to legal frameworks, from moral conscience to natural consequences, function as corrective mechanisms. Even when wrongdoing seems to succeed initially, these mechanisms exert pressure that eventually leads to exposure. The lesson is clear. Wrongdoing cannot outrun consequence. It may take time, and it may appear in forms that were unforeseen, yet the universe, society, or circumstance has a remarkable way of restoring balance. Moreover, the unpredictability of justice serves as a moral compass. When people understand that harmful actions are unlikely to succeed permanently, it reinforces the value of integrity and ethical decision-making. Those who act with malice may believe that careful planning or concealment ensures impunity, but history and experience demonstrate otherwise. Justice's indirect and unexpected nature is, in many ways, a safeguard. It discourages wrongdoing not through fear of immediate reprisal, but through the inevitability of eventual exposure. The idea that one cannot escape the natural consequences of their actions provides a profound lesson in accountability. Sometimes, justice manifests subtly, in ways that may seem almost poetic. It might be the exposure of a lie through an unrelated observation, the unearthing of hidden evidence by chance, or the support of a previously disengaged community member who brings truth into the light. These instances reinforce the notion that wrongdoing often sows the seeds of its own failure. Even if punishment is delayed or indirect, the principles of fairness and accountability eventually assert themselves. This reality encourages vigilance, ethical behavior, and awareness that actions ripple far beyond immediate perception. Importantly, the arrival of justice does not rely solely on human intervention. It can occur through circumstances that expose the truth naturally, through events that create opportunities for revelation, or through the resilience and wisdom of those affected. While human systems of law, regulation, and social accountability are vital, they are part of a broader web of checks and balances in life. The universality of cause and effect ensures that harmful intentions rarely escape consequence entirely. Even when injustice appears overwhelming, the eventual recognition of truth demonstrates the inherent resilience of moral and social structures. Justice in unexpected ways also provides hope and reassurance for those who feel powerless. Witnessing truth emerge, even slowly or indirectly, validates the experiences of victims and communities. It underscores the importance of perseverance, vigilance, and ethical conduct. Those who harm others may temporarily succeed in creating fear, doubt, or chaos, but these moments are temporary. Eventually, patterns emerge, inconsistencies are revealed, and resilience triumphs. Justice is a process, not always an event, and understanding this process empowers individuals to act wisely, support others, and maintain faith in the principle that wrongdoing carries consequences. Ultimately, justice arriving in unexpected ways is a reminder of the interconnectedness of human actions, societal systems, and natural consequence. It illustrates that no wrongdoing is truly invisible, no deception entirely sustainable, and no harmful intention entirely safe. Truth finds its way through community support, resilience, circumstance, and persistence. By recognizing this, individuals learn that morality is reinforced not just through laws or immediate retaliation, but through the broader forces of accountability and consequence that govern human interactions. Wrongdoing may cast temporary shadows, but the light of justice inevitably finds a way to reveal itself. Justice's unpredictability teaches patience, vigilance, and moral courage. It demonstrates that even in moments of despair, fairness has a way of asserting itself. Those who act with integrity, and those who endure wrongdoing, can take solace in the knowledge that consequences are inevitable, even if delayed, and that truth has a persistence stronger than deceit. Harmful intentions may appear successful in the short term, but the enduring lesson is that wrongdoing cannot escape exposure forever. Justice, though it may arrive quietly, indirectly, or unexpectedly, ultimately fulfills its role, restoring balance, truth, and accountability.